Chapter 29. Mended Unity. 10 days before the Toa's descent. Takua soon returned to Takura, accompanied by an escort of 12 Sanctum guards to ensure safer passage. Most Komatoran made for poor traveling companions, especially ones as disciplined as soldiers, which resulted in an exceptionally long and uncomfortable journey on Takua's behalf. Still, he felt much more secure in their presence, and while he was never fond of the intense heat of his former home, he was certainly happy to be out of the cold. The gate guards were initially confused at the sight of so many Komatoran approaching their village, but ultimately wasted little time in allowing them to enter. Takua requested a meeting with both the Turaga and the captain, where he relayed Turaga Nuju's plan to secure the Toa's passage into Macku's lair. Takua included his revision to the plan, which involved gathering all 6 villages rather than just 2. They stood around the map in Jalla's office to discuss the plan.
Macku has an army of Rahi at his disposal,
Takua explained.
And if he knows the Toa are coming for him, there's no doubt he'll try to use every last one of them to make sure they don't succeed.
That's correct,
Turaga Vakama said.
I fear he will attempt to seal the Toa in his underworld, imprisoning them there forever. Or worse, should the Toa attempt to flee, he will set the Rahi to ambush them as they emerge through the passage. They will be caught in a vice that will assuredly crush them.
You were right, Takua, Jalla said as he stroked the chin of his Kanohi How. This is an ambitious plan, but it may be the best chance we've got. The hardest part will be convincing all the villages to work together.
I have faith they'll make the right decision. If there's one thing I've learned during my short time as chronicler, it's that unity is not a lost cause.
Whatever happens that day, it will decide the fate of the Matoran forever. I'm certain they will understand this.
I'll send word out to the remaining outposts to relocate to Kini Nui. That will give us a few dozen Tamatoran to start with. I may be able to spare a few more from here, but it will be tight.
Send them all, every last one of us. As Takua said, Macku has an army, but so do we. We must utilize that.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Turaga. We still need a tight defense here in the village.
This fight will not take place within the villages. The focus will be on the Toa, and the Toa will be at Kini Nui.
These walls have remained unbreached for 100 years. We can't leave them defenseless now. It's not safe.
If our predictions are correct, the villages will be the safest they've been in history. Attacking them would serve no purpose. Macku will be forced to devote all his forces elsewhere.
And what if our predictions aren't correct?
Then the civilians will take up arms to defend themselves. It is a risk we'll have to take. We have little choice.
The Turaga has a point, Captain,
Takua added.
The villages may not need to be defended.
The captain shook his head. I don't like it, but it's not like we have much choice. I'll send them all, on one condition, he said, pointing toward the Turaga. You sit this out. If the village is the safest point during the battle, then that's where I want you. And not just you either. I don't want any of the Turaga participating in this mission.
We can't do that,
Vakama objected. Turaga, you're too valuable of an asset to lose. If this plan fails, then we'll need you here to continue to lead what's left of our population. I can be replaced. You can't.
I can't ask you to do this without us.
Then don't. I'll be the one making the call. Turaga Vakama sighed. He clearly wished to object further, but he knew the captain was right. He and the other Turaga were the only beings on the island that possessed adequate knowledge in guiding the Matoran through the mysteries of the island, a role he occasionally found burdensome.
Very well, then. We will begin preparations immediately.
As the Toa neared the end of their search for the keystone fragments, The Matorans spent the next several days carrying out an important mission of their own. The Sanctum guards that escorted Takua to his village were sent back to Kokoro with updates on the plan, which they presented to Turaga Nuju. Captain Picasta assembled not only all 116 active Sanctum guards in Kowahi, but 53 hunters, scholars, and crafters that volunteered to join the cause as well, including the left hand of Turaga Nuju, Kopik. Turaga Vakama traveled alone through Liwahi, utilizing his noble Huna to remain undetected along the way. He spoke with Turaga Matau and Kongu, who both gladly accepted the task, especially after hearing of the Chronicler's involvement in the plan. Arrangements were made, and 163 Li Matoran were made ready for battle, including all 105 Gecko pilots. After a day's rest, Vakama traveled to Onukoro via the newly completed underground highway, where he spoke to Turaga Wenua. When hearing of the plan, Tepu begged the Turaga to allow him to join, as well as every last Usselry guard he could muster. Turaga Wenua agreed, and in total, assigned 217 Onu Matoran and their Ussel Crab mounts toward the effort. Meanwhile, Takua traveled along the Huramafa River to Gakoro, accompanied by Kapura, Turaga Vakama's left hand. Turaga no Kama was pleased to hear how far Takua had come since their last meeting, and provided 108 Gamatoran volunteers to join the fight, only 80 of which were actual trained guards, while the rest were humble fisherwomen, gardeners, and crafters. Takua stood at the center platform of the village, watching the Gamatoran guards meet with Kai to discuss the plan along the beach in the distance, when he heard a familiar voice call to him from behind.
Takua!
Takua turned around to find Macku rushing up to him. In the 2 weeks since he had last seen her, he continued to reflect on the encouraging words she shared with him back in the Motara Desert. He had often used them as motivation during his travels when he began to lose his sense of direction. He felt he was an entirely different Matoran since their last interaction, and he had her to thank for that. When she reached him, she threw her arms around his neck.
You did it, Takua! I always knew it could be done.
We still have a long way to go,
Takua said with cautious optimism.
But just look what you've achieved already. You've accomplished what I've spent decades attempting. The villagers are united for the first time in over a century, all because of you.
It wasn't all me. I've had a lot of help in making this possible. And without everything you told me back in the desert, I never would have even conceived it as a possibility. This is our victory, Macku, not just mine.
Oh, I wish I could have joined you, but I couldn't bring myself to leave Huki behind. Not after all he went through.
I don't blame you for that. Besides, a part of you never left. You were the one that taught me the true meaning of unity, and it got me through a lot of tough places. You were the first true friend I've ever had, and because of you, I was able to make even more.
Macku smiled. She never understood why Takua was always so hard on himself before, but she was happy to see how far he had come.
How is Huki, by the way?
Takua asked.
He's fully recovered. By the time I left, he was stronger than ever.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Speaking of Huki, we'll be making a trip to Pokoro tomorrow. We'd be happy to have you tag along.
Macku's eyes lit up.
Of course! I'd love to.
The next day, the Matorans set out for Pokoro. This time, they were accompanied by Kapura, Kai, and every Takoro guard stationed at the Gawahi outpost. During their trek across the Motara Desert, they were ambushed by a Kane Ra and 2 Nui Jaga in total. The added numbers in their company turned the battles in their favor, though they were enough to remind them of the challenge they were up against should Makuta send his army of Rahi toward Kini Nui. Turaga Anawa relayed the news to the Pokoro Guard, who gladly offered their aid in the upcoming battle. The Matoran of Pokoro hailed the Chronicler as a hero for his help in discovering the source of the plague, and jumped at the chance to receive payback against Macku for making them suffer so greatly. 247 Po-Matoran were added to the army, including all 200 Po-Koro guards. The following day, they marched back toward Ga-Koro with resources for Kini-Nui's defense, making for a much safer journey through the desert. Though their numbers drew plenty of attention, every infected Rahi foolish enough to attack the crowd was instantly turned into a lightning rod for arrows, tomahawks, and spears. The Po-Matoran remained in Ga-Koro overnight, hearing rumored updates on the Toa's progress in their Keystone search. The following morning, they joined the Ga-Matoran in migrating through the hidden passage behind Naho Falls, which provided a straight shot to Kini-Nui through an underground tunnel. They reached the temple to find more than 200 Ta-Matoran already camped out throughout the valley, with more pouring in each day as they siphoned their guards from the village gradually at Captain Jalla's request, until 398 Ta-Matoran were present at Kini-Nui. The Ko-Matoran were next to join, followed by the Onu-Matoran and their Ussel Crabs, and eventually the Li-Matoran. For the remaining days of the Toa's search, the gathered Matoran were hard at work preparing their defense. As the hour drew near, Matoran scouts began sending reports that infected Rahi had begun a slow migration toward Kini-Nui, with some even claiming they ignored the Matoran when spotted. The sighted Rahi moved at a relaxed yet deliberate pace, all closing in on the same location. The steady pace at which they traveled sent a clear message to all Matoran. Macku was aware of their plan, and he wanted to ensure they had time to realize he accepted the challenge. Another night passed, and the Matoran continued their preparations. The infected Rahi were still advancing on their position. Mere hours after sunrise, another news report sent a shockwave throughout the gathered army.
The Toa of Stone has arrived! All Keystone fragments have been retrieved!